Welcome to the Sutherland Report. Notice I have a very, very calm demeanor. I can honestly say to you that about a minute ago, it wasn't a calm demeanor because it's tech issues. We can all relate to that. And my dear guest and dear friend can particularly relate to that. So I'm going to bring on Kevin Shipp right away, and then we're just going to sit down and have a wonderful conversation.
Hello,
Kevin,
my good friend.
hello, my friend. I'm really sorry about that, but man, oh man. Well, we just thank God that he's in charge, but the tech issues drive us a little bit annoyed.
Been
And
there.
so I'm just making that confession. First of all, how are you before we get into things? How are things?
I'm doing just great. Really, the Lord has been good. I'm the healthiest I've been in a long, long time. We're still doing interviews, of course, and writing op-eds. And my lovely wife and best friend and I are running our off-the-grid farm. So life is good.
Good. Kevin, I think there's much to reflect on, as I alluded to you in an email, that what's going on this side of the pond is frankly driving me up the wall, especially when you've tried to warn about things and do things, and then suddenly it's here and people are still not listening. So, what is your perspective on what is happening on your side of the pond? Because a heck of a lot has been happening, and I just wondered how you feel about that.
Well, I have to tell you, Mark, it's it's remarkable. I mean, in my entire adult life and certainly my career life, I have never seen scrutiny of the shadow government CIA like we're seeing now. I mean, this is something that I've been fighting for, sometimes alone, for over 12 years, that this information comes out and the CIA specifically is held accountable for its criminal violations of the Constitution and law. So the Trump administration comes in, and I am just stunned. It's really a miracle to see how explosive and what an expose the current Trump administration is doing of the shadow government, deep state. I know there's some people say there is no deep state. They really need to do some research. I call it the shadow government because the CIA is pulling the levers, but they need to do some research. There's no doubt about that. And of course, I've proven that in other lectures. But what we're seeing is a complete shakeup of this dark cabal that has been running the United States government at the highest levels for decades, and certainly under the Biden administration, who was their kind of mindless puppet, the CIA's. What we were seeing in the America's decline was shocking, and it was wickedness coming into our country, which was founded on truth. Trump comes in with his transition team and all of his cabinet appointees. I'm telling you, Mark, I don't think it could be any better. Now, we always have one eye open because we are facing a battle from the powers of darkness and from this dark elite that I was just talking about. This is all wonderful news. It's good news. It's inspiring, but the battle has just begun. We need to be vigilant, watch our backs, stay on track, and of course that includes Trump and his cabinet, because the powers of hell on the dark side of this cabal are going to try to do everything they can to destroy what Trump and his cabinet are trying to do.
Can we discuss? I don't know the judge's name, but I think we need to discuss the behavior of it, and then it does show the other aspects of the cabal. So a judge has then given an edict that in many ways then thinks that his edict should go across the whole of the federal government, e.g., affecting the whole of America. And it's in regard to, and tell me if I've got this wrong, in regard to immigration, who can be removed, who can't be removed.
Right.
Now, when you talk about the shadow government, when we talk about the deep state, because there are some really important parallels that I think we need to get across to all our viewers to say that this is worldwide, and this is a good lead in. So could you explain to me what this judge has done? I don't know whether his sermon, is it the man Basukus or something? I think I most probably murdered his complete surname. But he has given a ruling in regard to a deportation of people. What Could you explain a bit and how that is affecting things in the United States?
Yeah, it's outrageous. He's trying to dictate, a single judge. He's trying to dictate to the executive branch of our government, way out of his bounds. And many of us know that have crossed judges like this, that have this narcissistic personality and think that they're some kind of god and can do whatever they want. This is a case, I think, that needs to be a public case of at least the beginning of an investigation for impeachment of this man, what he's doing. There's no question about it. And I think that's very well going to happen. And in a way, it's a good thing this is happening, because it's exposing some of these many Soros-funded judges and DAs that are doing this unconstitutional, anti-American stuff within our country. So that's the good side of it, that this fellow has been exposed. Now, Pam Bondi, the AG, who's a brilliant attorney, and I'm thankful that she's in that position, just used the state secrets privilege to shut down any of this judge's further attempts to stop the Trump administration. And I understand that, because this man has to be stopped. But as from my books and speeches, that I don't think the state secrets privilege should be used lightly ever. I mean, it was founded on a lie to keep an unclassified crash report from being seen by the daughters and husbands of a B-2 bomber crash in the States. Right. So, and I put out an op-ed and my co-author, and I think it was seen by 1 million people, just saying, no, don't use the privilege for things like this. It's only restricted for serious national security things, satellite technology, troop movements, and things like that. But so I disagree with its use. I disagree with its constitutional existence, frankly. But it has shut this judge down, and that is what it is. I hope that they move forward with impeachment of this judge, because there are so many of these judges now, especially the Soros-backed ones, that actually think that they're in the position of the Supreme Court. And I'm hoping that the Supreme Court will take up this case and cases like it and rule that a single judge cannot manipulate or control the executive branch.
And I suppose it's a bit of re-education right now, is the fact that in regard to the J6 prisoners and the 1,600 that were pardoned by President Trump as soon as he came in, if we go back to when they stood trial and the number of that they would go into the court, and immediately they are told that their constitutional rights are suspended.
That's right.
Now, I think, Kevin, that, I mean, I'm underlining this point deliberately, but I don't think the American public actually understand that within a court of law, and it's parallel with this judge, that this is what's going on. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely outrageous. Due process is a part of our constitutional governmental system. That was outrageous, and it was illegal. And I've said this before, I'm hoping that they will track down these prosecuting attorneys and these judges that did that abominable act against U.S. citizens. That is just unconscionable, and they need to be held accountable, and they need to pay for doing that to many innocent American civilians who were protesting, most of which went to protest at the Capitol. Now, there are some few bad apples in that bunch, of course, as there always is. But no, this is extremely serious. And the American people need to understand that this needs to be addressed. And these prosecutors in the Department of Justice who did this, they need to be held accountable. And I think they need to be charged with violating Title 18 or criminal law for removing these people's due process. American citizens are doing this. You talk about heading for absolute tyranny in a government. This is probably the best example I've seen in the last couple of decades. So people need to continue to voice their outrage that these people, grandmothers and others, were pastors, were arrested just for being at the Capitol. Unbelievable. It shows you how bad things got with the shadow government, deep state, whatever. When I call it the shadow government because it involves the intelligence agencies, but how far they were able to go under the Biden administration in destroying our Constitution. This is absolutely huge.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I think we have to, and it ties in with this, and I'm going to come back to it in a minute. We have got to remind ourselves of how many of these so-called ex-members of the letter agencies made comments in regard to the Biden laptop, right? Am I
Right.
saying we've got what, a minimum of 46,
Right.
sort of signatories on that?
Right.
And then just before that, and I think you would be fully aware of this, I've forgotten Millie's surname, but I remember her, this particular filmmaker, making a film, and then she was soon arrested after it was produced a couple of years ago. And she talked about how data and information was collected against the American Constitution. And
Right.
they then showed this gate where information went one way and then it went another. Do you think people are waking up genuinely to what happened in the Jan 6 situation? We then look at dear Tina Peters, that is still in jail. I think in I think she's in Colorado. I do apologize if I've got that wrong. Where she was overseeing the collection of vote and making sure that the Democratic remit in regard to how American people in her county were exercising their vote. Then she found the proof that this wasn't right, and then she ends up in jail. Do you think that American people are honestly waking up to this, or is still there a reluctance to face up to the deep issues that have been portraying out over the last few years?
Well, based on the input I'm getting and our followers and other people's followers, yes, the American people are waking up, and the election of Donald Trump is a concrete indication of that. Up until people are starting to see these things come out finally through the independent media and programs like yours, people didn't know this. They were just providing it for their families and trying to survive, and they weren't aware of how bad this was, or they didn't want to sacrifice their livelihood or their pension or what have you to come out. Yes, they are starting to wake up, but this needs to continue. This is about just under half the American population, I think, that is waking up, and the other half is still sleeping, and that's why we need to keep doing what we're doing here, because this is the moment in American history, without question. Our country was falling. Now, excuse me, Mark. Now there's a real opportunity to bring America back to what it was intended, and back to goodness, back to being a good country again. Also, this is the opportunity, and we need to keep waking people up. I've said since I came out in 2012. The light will dispel darkness, and the pen is mightier than the sword. That's why I do what I do, because when you inform people with factual evidence.
I've lost you. Don't worry. Well, don't worry. This is power for the cause. It's certainly power for the cause.
How's that?
Oh, that's perfect. You're back. Brilliant.
Somebody muted my mic. Gee, I wonder who that was.
I wonder who that is.
This happens all the time, but we just keep going.
We do, and that's one of the reasons why it is quite exciting to have these conversations with you, because when we get called, no, you're lying, when you have this interference and all that, it's true.
Oh,
so
yeah,
we've just seen it. So you were just talking about
half
you
the
American
froze, Mark.
population. Have I frozen? Wow. Well,
yeah,
I haven't frozen my end, but go. So you were just saying about half the American population being asleep, the other half woken up. So how
that's right.
And do you think we have an opportunity to change that?
Yes, Mark. At any time in our history, we do right now. So much so, I consider this miraculous. I was dreaming that this would happen, but was thinking now that it seemed impossible. But here we are. Kash Patel over the FBI, a dream come true, no doubt about it. John Ratcliffe now is the director of the CIA. That's where the battle is going to be. I hope he is aware. God willing, I hope he's seen some of my stuff. I hope he's aware he's going into a snake's den, and they are going to fight him at every turn. There is a CIA bureaucracy below the director of the CIA that is going to withhold information from him, give him false information, or give him no information at all. Like Pompeo said, they did that to him when he was in there. James Woolsey, when he was DCI, said they did the same thing to him. They will do this. The CIA will do anything to survive. I have seen that from inside. So that's the one agency. I think Ratcliffe is a great choice for the job because he's the only one that stood up against these initially 42 senior intelligence officers, including the deputy director of the CIA, who said Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation when they knew darn well it wasn't, and they signed this false statement, thankfully, and really a lot of gratification on my part. They have had their security clearances revoked for doing that because it was false, it was fake, and it was a lie. And if anybody thinks that the CIA is not controlling our elected government, despite having seen my presentations, well, here's a classic indication. 42 of them and another one, 56 of them. But in this case, 42 senior intelligence officials lied to the American people to discredit Donald Trump and his bid for the presidency and push a president that largely was controlled by the CIA. That same group of intelligence officers also signed a statement saying that they considered Donald Trump as a threat to national security. And you don't think the CIA is controlling our elections in Congress? Well, that's right out in front of they're not even hiding it anymore. So, it was very, very dark and very bad. And as someone who came out exposing the CIA, it was very dangerous at times. I feel a little safer than I used to, a lot because of what's happened. But we are right at the place where we need to push this through all the way. And the American people need to get behind this administration, behind these cabinet level officials, because this is real. This opportunity is real. And this change and expose of government is real. And this is a huge moment in American history. And we, the people, and the other 45% of the people who aren't listening, we need to get to them with programs like this and write op-eds so that this information gets to them in a way they can understand it. So we get the majority of Americans standing up against what was deep state shadow government control of our entire governmental system.
I hear you very, very, very loudly. What I don't understand is when, we've got those 46 plus signatories of the 3-letter agencies, they're paid by the public purse, aren't they? They are paid by American taxpayers. So what do you think goes through these people's minds for them to actually say, no, we are running America? What goes through their minds? How can they justify their thinking knowing that they are coming against this may be a naive question, Kevin, that they're coming against the Constitution of the United States? What do you think is what's their motivation?
That is the question, Mark. And Pompeo, when he came out, sadly, he went native when he was in there and put out an assassination program on Julian Assange when he was in the Ecuadorian embassy. Shocking. Sadly, and he withheld or convinced Donald Trump to withhold the JFK files, and that's how that happened. So he went native, but when he came out, even he said he regretted not doing the reforms that the CIA needed, and he told Bobby Kennedy, who of course is a friend of mine, and he's a tremendous man, tremendous person, told Bobby Kennedy that he found that the 20% of the CIA, the upper management, do not believe in democracy, and they do not believe in the U.S. Constitution. Now, I would expand that, having been in there up to the 7th floor. All they believe in is the expansion of the CIA and the protection of its existence and the protection of its global power. So there's no question about that. And that's why I'm putting out all these reforms for everybody to see that this monster needs to be stopped. So, the CIA is out of control. As you know, it's been out of control. It is still out of control. And John Ratcliffe has really, really got to have his hands full. And he's got to have some people in the administration that understand the monster they're dealing with, have Ratcliffe's back, make sure he gets a deputy director of the CIA that is not from the inside. But even then, for example, if you'll permit me to expand a little bit, John Ratcliffe came out, and with Doge, they eliminated several positions within the CIA. Most notably, they closed down and eliminated the DEI programs in the agency, to which I gave a shout of yay, because when I was in there, DEI was beginning to run the CIA, and they were hiring transgender employees going into the bathrooms. And I wrote an article against DEI back in 1994 on an internal CIA database. The fact that this was not just unconstitutional, it was dividing the CIA, and it was bringing incompetent, or at least lower skilled people into very sensitive positions. And in the book Twilight of the Shadow Government, I give a case when I was a team leader on defective operations, how they tried to put a person who couldn't even hit the target with a gun because of the demographics. It was a horrible and bad situation. But what Ratcliffe did was eliminate the DEI programs, which I have been crying for since 2002. That is extremely gratifying. But personnel changes, excuse me, allergies, or the pine pollen is just rampant down here. So
I hear. Do not worry. Do not worry.
But removing people from positions to cut waste, that's great. Removing all the DEI staff and people, that's also great. But personnel changes are not going to reform the CIA. They never will. The real half of the CIA, or a little greater than half the CIA, is the dark side of the CIA that is operating many times without Congress's knowledge and doing these sometimes genocidal coups and things like that. That if the American people know what I know, and some of which I can never say, they would demand that the CIA be shut down because it's doing these things. So that continues today. Ratcliffe, we need to pray for him constantly, for his protection, and for really divine help and ability for him to pierce down through this veil of the power of secrecy that the CIA has.
Brilliant. You've mentioned prayer, because yes, pray for him and others, and also to keep you in prayer as well. This is really important. And I was going to say this earlier, as Ephesians 6 says, we're not fighting flesh and blood, but principalities and powers. And that's I know right. For myself that at times I get criticized because I'm talking politics. Well, politics is a principality. That's Look right. At how this is. And also in our previous discussions, when I've said that the president of the United States has always been seen as leader of the free world. And we only have to think about that over the last 4 years,
right,
in regard to the ramifications of what that's had on the rest of the world,
right.
of the world, Kevin.
That's right.
This is a reality. Kevin, how is the UK looking at the moment from your side of the pond? Help me out here. What is the view that you are getting?
Well, I hope the UK is not irreparably harmed. DEI got into the UK, as you know, and basically, it's called cultural jihad. The radical Islamicists will penetrate a society and then reproduce until the population is so large it will take over that society. It's a jihadist technique. And I personally have seen that in the UK to the point where I cannot believe they let this happen. But that's how powerful and how bad and deceptive DEI is. It takes over entire countries, and that has happened in the UK. I hope it can be turned around, but as you and I know, if they keep pushing God and the gospel and church out of British society and out of the UK, there will be no hope. The only hope is for believers in the United Kingdom that can educate and write and speak out and pray that the UK will turn around from this godless system that it has allowed to come across its borders, and that's the only hope. Without that, and I think about this often, the UK is in serious decline.
We are in serious trouble, and then let's link up Pompeo and our present Prime Minister Keir Starmer, because Starmer was, and I want to know your opinion on this, round about 2017-18, it looks like he joined the Trilateral Commission. In Correct. 2022, he resigned. In between that period, there is a photograph of him with the American ambassador and Mike Pompeo and him in between. Before that, when he was director of public prosecutions, there is this discussion about him taking flights to America to meet that individual called Eric Holder, the ex-Obama Attorney General. I don't know what's going on there fully. I'm researching stuff, but then Julian Assange name comes up, and that casts dispersions again on what you were saying about Mike Pompeo. So this is where we are at. Kevin, can we just briefly talk about the Trilateral Commission? I know it started in 1973. I just want to know your viewpoint on that, why the understanding of it is so important.
Yes, Mark, we talk about this. Who is this secret cabal that is engaging in all of these dark activities and controlling governments, connected, of course, into Skull and Bones and other things like that? If you go through who's belonged to the Trilateral Commission, it'll raise the hair on the back of your neck. This is a group of narcissistic elites that believe that they are the brilliant ones to control really the affairs of the world. This is a real organization. It really exists, and these people are really members. And if they're a member, that shows you who they are and what their goal is, and that's global world order, no question about it. In regards to Starmer, I'm pretty close to reaching the conclusion that he has ties with the U.S. intelligence, specifically the CIA. The things that he has done, I hope the British people are aware of, and you hit it right on every single point about him, that it's very serious. All people need to know is the truth about him and what he's been involved in. And we need, and you're doing such a great job getting that truth out to the British people. My heart goes out to the British people because they're kind of held captive by their current government system.
Well, the other thing that we have is the fact that there now doesn't seem any sort of political outlet now, as Steve, quoting Steve Quayle, has said, there is no political solution to a spiritual problem,
Right?
And he is absolutely right.
Absolutely.
And without going into various things, but let's just say that the goings on that happened in a 3-year period where we had the lockdown of this country. And the reason why I'm actually wearing this shirt today is because it's a shirt that I saw myself in an interview 5 years ago, where I then discovered I pointed to by a contact of mine that who had read this, where our government had said that the particular 19 of COV had been downgraded from a highly infectious disease to a not so highly infectious disease, and then within days we went into lockdown. In other words, you've just illustrated this. The evidence is out there now in regard to, which is just an outrage. And now with all the other stuff coming out, people are going, "Are you telling me that we didn't have to lock down? No, we didn't. Are you telling me that, oh dear, that wasn't a good idea for me to take that?" You're absolutely right. And I don't say it as anyone going, "I told you so." It breaks my heart, to be honest, because it's trying to wake people up. But going back to Starmer, there's only been 2 articles written in Labour Party magazines, a paper where it talked about his links with the Trilateral Commission. Now,
Right,
here's the
correct.
other link, the link with, and I want to know more. I mean, Patrick Wood of Technocracy News, I've had the privilege to interview Patrick in the past. He is really up on all of that, as you know, and also quite rightly raising concerns about maybe some of the tech giants around the president of the United States.
Yes.
Some of them got Peter Thiel, etc.,
Yes.
that we have to
Oh,
be
yeah.
very, very aware of, right?
Yes.
Very aware of. But we have got, when Tony Blair was in power, he got rid of the top judge and then created a Supreme Court. That Supreme Court, when we voted to leave, was used, and now we've got this issue with judges that in many ways they're not pushing forward what the people voted for, which was to leave the EU. And our present Prime Minister did whatever he could from day one when he became a member of parliament after that devote to do whatever he can to reverse it. That's the truth of it. So we have got this issues because we're a member of the European Court of Human Rights. We then can't deport immigrants because they either don't like the chicken. I'm not joking on this. They don't like the chicken nuggets in other countries. They only like us, even if they've done certain sexual crimes that are just abhorrent. No, we can't get rid of them because they're entitled to a family life. I could go on. The lunacy that is going on within our judicial system. So look at this. And then what a load of people don't understand, for argument's sake, with what's happening in Israel with Bibi Netanyahu, judges are turning around when he wanted to reform the judicial system, because basically they will not allow any what they perceive as right wing or a conservative person who's in power to do what they promise the people to do. So again, that shadow government, that civil service blob, and in their case, and it's a very different, the constitution is different in Israel to America. You've got far more checks and balances. This is what's going on, where it's the judiciary that are controlling countries or making decisions. So I'm finding this really, really interesting. Kevin, have you got are you paying attention to what is happening in Canada in regard to Mark Carney, in regard to Trudeau stepping down? I just wonder what your thoughts on there as well.
Yeah, I think there's something more behind the scenes that even those of us that are looking into it see. I mean, Trudeau stepping down is a very good thing. I mean, the guy was almost a neo-Marxist, for goodness sake. Almost, I think he was. So his departure is great. His replacement, I don't know much about his political choices in the past. Trump is funny sometimes because when he knows something, he'll goad the opponent. Like Canada should become the 51st state of America. And I know that's not going to happen, Trump, but he knows. But putting that barb out there is going to stir up the beehive, and he certainly has done that. So Canada is at a turning point also from a essentially neo-Marxist government. We'll see where that's going to go or how they're going to stop that. But I'm hoping the Canadian people know that. But yeah, the change is a good thing, but I'm not sure how his replacement is going to handle that as yet.
Well, the unfortunate thing is we're talking another World Economic Forum puppet. We're talking an ex-Goldman Sachs banker. Maybe he was even involved with the Bank of International Settlements. I'm not saying this to be clever. And then he was running the Bank of England. The Canadians, dear friends of mine over there are going, now we're going to pull our hair out even more. This is not good at all. And it's saying, please, Americans, pray for what's happening in Canada. This is fundamentally important, but it shows our prime minister, when there was a meeting in Brazil with Lula, another left-wing lunatic, a number of months ago, Keir Starmer sat down with Trudeau. We just wonder what was talked about. So suddenly, he resigns, Carney comes in. Our Labour Party has deep links with the Democratic Party in America. Kevin, how constitutional is it for outside powers to interfere with the politics of the United States when it's rumored that Labour Party activists from the UK went over to help Kamala Harris and her campaign? Were you aware of that?
Yes, and that sort of operation is criminal. But we have to remember that is what the CIA is all about. It is that kind of manipulation. And we're talking about this secret cabal that is controlling all of this. And I've been working very hard, as you probably have, in identifying exactly the names of these people. We know some of them. You just talked about one of them. But they want to destroy democracy. in its purest form, in its constitutional form. That's their goal, is to destroy it. And every connection you just noted with the incoming prime minister is a deep state global party. Connected, Deutsche Bank, for example, and others, JP Morgan, connected to Wall Street and the CIA. So you have got an operation against Canada now. And it sounds like the way you describe Trudeau's replacement, that's exactly what this is. It's a soft coup in Canada, where this cabal, Trilateral Commission, and the CIA always has its hands in the dirty pot, are literally overthrowing, in a soft coup, the government of Canada, and putting globalists, even worse than Trudeau, in place.
Absolutely. And the other thing that is fascinating is that Pompeo was quoted, "We're going to do whatever we can to make sure that Jeremy Corbyn did not win the British election in 2019. So he didn't win. Boris Johnson comes in. Nigel Farage with the Brexit Party, which is another subject in itself, stands down to allow the Conservative Party to, which are only Conservative in name only, to have a run for it. Then he gets an 80-seat majority, and frankly, Brexit was not done at all. And whatever people think about Ukraine, Russia, the fact that he then, as soon as within 2 weeks, there's a discussion about a ceasefire and a deal, Boris Johnson flies over there to make sure that Zelensky doesn't sign that at all and stops all that. And then we think of all the deaths that have gone on over the last few years since then. Kevin, I'm not saying any of this to be clever. I'm just saying this because we need to know this stuff, and the American people need to know this stuff, because it's horrendous. And I'm going to give a plug. You're fully aware of Trevor Loudon's book, The Enemy is Within.
Yeah.
And
very good.
Precisely. And this is what we need to be doing. Doge has had an effect on the UK, sir, which is rather interesting. Doge investigation. There's some very left-wing centrists. They have a podcast called Rory Stewart and Alistair Campbell. Rory Stewart's wife was running an NGO in Afghanistan, and because of USAID defunding, that has now been stopped. Now, these are two individuals that went out and interviewed the new Syrian leader of a man that they think, because an ISIS leader is now wearing a suit, that must mean that they can then have a proper discussion. I know. This is the foolishness and the madness that is going on, my friend. That's why it's great to sit down with you and have this discussion, because the Devil's Chessboard book comes to mind, because it literally is the devil's chessboard is playing out, Kevin. Yeah. Kevin, over the next few weeks, over the next few months, how do you see the administration unfolding in regard to going forward and dealing with things within America and around the world? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think we're probably not going to hear much about reform of the CIA unless, and I just posted my recent video on step 1 of CIA reform. We're not going to hear much about the CIA because the only way to change it is through these reforms. And they've been real quiet about that. I think I hope Trump knows what he has on his hands. And it's funny that some of these JFK files that were released, unredacted, and revealed some of the CIA's techniques and operations that it has conducted, almost like Trump is poking the bear, like, we know who you are. Let's hope that that's the case. So we need to hold out and just watch Ratcliffe and watch the CIA. They're going to try to stay quiet and silent, and we need to stay on that one. Kash Patel over the FBI. Some of the best news I've heard to date. There's going to be knives out for him, as there will be for each one of these cabinet appointees. But I really believe Kash Patel is going to reform the FBI and its gross criminal activity that it has done with impunity. There's going to be a lot of waves in the FBI. There's going to be a lot of disturbing information coming out. There's going to be a lot of lawsuits against Kash Patel. It's going to be a mess, but it needs to be a mess. This whole thing needs to be shaken up. Tulsi Gabbard over as Director of National Intelligence. Talk about poetic justice, somebody that the shadow government surveilled and put on a terrorist watch list illegally is now in charge of them. You got to love that. So there's going to be a lot of shaking up in the United States government. There's going to be some violence coming out from the people that oppose this kind of change back to a constitutional form of government. So it's going to be both inspiring and fulfilling, but very, very messy. We're in a war in the United States, light against dark. And I don't mean that lightly. So it's probably going to be one of the most fascinating and interesting things for everybody around the world to watch in the United States in the history of this country. Trump's actions towards other countries, the UK, Canada, China, and others are also stirring up the pot that needs to be stirred up, and getting some of these countries to comply with American standards that they would not have otherwise done without without tariffs. Some of the tariffs that all of the tariffs, really, in my mind, that Trump is instituting, these tariffs are getting the attention of these countries who would not bend, would not change, would not listen to the fact that they were being taken over, essentially by high-level criminality. Well, Trump knows he's a remarkable man. He gets kind of, you think, a little wacky at times, and then he bounces back and does something absolutely brilliant. And that's what he's doing now with these tariffs on all these countries. He's getting them to act like that film said, Jerry Maguire, follow the money, Jerry. And that's how you get to these people. It's the only thing they understand. So with the tariffs that Trump is instituting, that's going to cause a world shakeup for the good. And it's going to cause a lot of these countries to have to change this. It's going to hit them where it counts, and that's where the money is. So it's a fascinating time, as people say this. I don't mean it as just a quip. It really is a fascinating time to be alive at the hour that we're in, especially in the United States and around the world. And for the first time, these global powers, the so-called New World Order, of which George H.W. Bush was an integral part, this New World Order is being challenged. Some of it's being split open. Now, they're not going to, the Trilateral Commission is some of these high-level members of this cabal, which I consider a group of malignant narcissists. They're not going to go down without a fight. So we can expect some pretty serious counteractions from the World Economic Forum and some of these other organizations against the Trump administration. And they may even use U.S. intelligence, specifically the CIA, to help them do that.
I hear you. Now, you mentioned the JFK files. I want to not put you totally on the spot or get you into trouble, but in the last sort of 10 minutes, but what are your thoughts on what was released or not released, and the light that it shines on Lyndon B. Johnson? What are your thoughts, sir?
Well, as I've said before in other interviews, before these documents were released, Americans especially shouldn't get their hopes up that there's going to be a smoking gun about the CIA assassinating John F. Kennedy. Remember when MK Ultra was exposed, just the tip of that iceberg was exposed by Frank Church and the Church Committee. The director of the CIA, Richard Helms, immediately destroyed 10,000 MK Ultra documents. We also remember that Lisa Haspel, then director of the CIA, who was responsible for the torture program, and it was more than just waterboarding, destroyed 10 videotapes of tortures subpoenaed by Congress and got away with it. So this is the kind of power that these people have, and the kind of power that they wield, and they're not going to go down lightly. So it's a time of vigilance for all of us that we have to continue and keep doing, in programs like yours, and why I have you at the top of my list, which has been busy, because you're a truth teller and you've got the courage and the faith, and those two have to go together. You got the courage and the faith to come out and say these things truthfully, whether people want to hear them or not. And the ones that don't want to hear them, when you say them, it'll sink in eventually. And that's why I'm such a great supporter of you and your program.
Kevin, thank you, because that means a heck of a lot, and I appreciate that, because everything when we've been accused of being conspiracy theorists and all the rest, and it's interesting because that relates to the whole thing of JFK and creating that comment. The last thing we want to say is we've run out of them because they're all true, but we have reached that point. And
yes.
Go on, sorry.
Yes, and I think there, and I say this publicly, a lot of former CIA officers don't want to say anything because of their pension, their career, or they use the CIA as a calling card. I am absolutely convinced the CIA was involved in the assassination of John F. Kennedy, along with their connections in the mafia, Jack Ruby, of course, and others. There is evidence. I'm not talking theories. I'm talking evidence. There's a 201 file, CIA 201 file on Oswald. There are receipts that he was a paid CIA employee, and on and on and on it goes. I would recommend everybody read a book called JFK and the Unspeakable. Bobby Kennedy and I both agree with that book. Read that book because there is evidence in there, evidence of CIA involvement. And so these files didn't come out and show a smoking gun. They were remarkable in that they redacted some CIA techniques and operations. And regarding LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson's, I think he was also a part of that whole planning, just my opinion, and based especially on Roger Stone's book, where he presents some pretty compelling evidence that Johnson's fingerprints literally are on that. So I think we have enough to reach that conclusion now. And these 80,000 documents revealing, unredacted, which is the beautiful part. And this is how the CIA does things. This is how the CIA keeps information from Congress and the public. They say, no, this involves CIA sources and methods. And by law, we can use that whenever we want. Because this is a CIA source or method. Well, they tried that in these files, but Trump unredacted that so-called sources and methods, and we saw the truth. So that is historic, and we hope there are more files coming out still, and we'll see what those include.
Having stood next to a dear friend of mine when the FBI knocked on his door, that's a subject for another day, but that has been put out there, and you're aware of that. It's been, when you've got FBI officers asked to sit in their cars in school playgrounds, ready to arrest parents for, challenging the schools over what they're teaching or what's in the library. And then they're turning around and saying, no, this is unacceptable. I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
We're not saying that everyone is bad in the FBI. I'm not.
Right.
Your thoughts. We're not saying that, are we?
Right. Oh, I worked when I was in the counterespionage group and special investigations unit. I worked with some wonderful FBI agents, and especially on some of the high-risk protective details that we in the FBI are working together. I met some great FBI agents. It's not them at all. It's upper FBI management, which I also saw personally how corrupt they were. It was shocking. They would leak information to the press on espionage cases just to cover their own rear end. And of course, Robert Hansen, the FBI special agent, became one of the biggest espionage cases in history. So that's how bad this has been in terms of essentially putting us under a post-constitutional government. And if you look behind me, you see a picture of an avalanche. And one of the last statements in Trilateral, the Shadow Government, and when I talk about the 12 reforms of the CIA, is the one that is really important is there needs to be an avalanche of demand by the American people, by the millions, that the CIA be reformed radically using the steps that I humbly am recommending, and that the same American people put pressure on their congressmen and senators, many of whom are in the CIA's pocket or have stock in Lockheed Martin and other CIA contractors, that people put pressure on their congressmen and senators to reform the CIA, or else, and if they don't, they vote them out of office. So the avalanche, millions of Americans standing up against this, as it has been historically, is the only real way to see the CIA reformed.
Amen. And I just want to bring this book up because it's a good link, which is the book of the American Gulag Chronicles, to even now offer support for all the J6 prisoners that have been released. Yes. And when we've reached a point in the United States, let's just remind ourselves where people were, NRAP, the big vehicles were sent round with squads of 20 to 25 FBI officers pulling families out of their homes under red dots, etc., and then arresting members of their family in front of their children. This is not what, it's very, very un-American,
Right.
but you and I would also go through history to say when certain things, other things have been un-American that the American public have been unaware
That's
of.
right.
But this is where we'll reach. Kevin, in the last couple of minutes, where can people find you, find your work, and find your new book, etc.?
Yeah, thank you. And it's hard to find me because I'm on a little off-the-grid farm somewhere deep in the southeast
I
United
don't
States.
want them finding
I'm
you.
just kidding.
I didn't mean it like that.
That's true. That's true. But I'm just joking. I put out, you'll see recently an op-ed coming out. The CI got in and blocked my X account. All 13 steps of CI reform were taken down, and then my account was frozen, suspended. And this is a great story when the op-ed comes out. But Bobby Kennedy got in there for me, contacted or sent me over to James Musk, who got into X and found out that my account had been taken over with a fake account with the same name. I had been suspended, and all my 13 steps of CI reform had been suspended. And they got into X and they fixed all that and got me back into publishing reforms again. It is x.com/Kevin_Shipp, SHIPP. And that's where I put out the explosive exposés of just raw truth to people. I think we were up to 125,000 followers and climbing. We haven't even boosted our posts yet. So if people want to get the truth fast and free, at Kevin_Shipp is the way to do it. That's my goal. That's my mission, is to inform people.
Right. And where can they find your book?
They can go to Amazon.com. It's sold out. It's a bestseller by the grace of God. It's sold out. It's back in stock now. They can go to Amazon.com and they can get it there. The CI will probably try to take my royalties because I finally published it without their approval, knowing that they were going to even if they let it out, they would redact the entire book. So they'll probably go after my royalties. And that, I consider that a badge of honor. But the book itself can be found on Amazon.com, and it's one of a kind. I think, and I say that along with my courageous friend and co-author, Kent Heckenlively. Follow Kent on whatever books he writes, because that man has got raw guts, and he's a tremendous writer. All on Amazon.com, so people can find it there.
Brilliant. And Kevin, I have to confess, I must get myself a copy. So I will action that. Kevin, can I just say it's been an utter delight to sit down and talk to you, and also to be able to reflect on what is going on across the pond, because it's affecting both of our governments and other countries elsewhere. And this is worldwide, and we need everyone to be praying about it. And I do believe there are far more praying believers in America on these issues and more than there are over here. I have to say, as the wokery has totally invaded the church, but that's another subject for another day. You're absolutely right about DEI. And I am shocked to even hear when you were saying you're referring to that back in 1994. Look at where we have come from, or people have said, well, where did this come from 5 or 6 years ago?
Yeah.
Actually, it's been in the play for a long time.
Yeah.
Kevin, I just want to thank you for your time. I pray that we can do this again soon. It's much appreciated. We fight through the technology grief that we've been having, but we are here. So please stay safe, my friend, and thank you so much for your time.
You too, my friend. You're at the top of my list. Always a pleasure to come on. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. I'm going to play us out. I'll say goodbye to you on the other side. Thank you.